I used to think a house was just wood and nails until the day I watched strangers change the lock on mine. There's a key on my ring, silver, a little scratched, that once felt like proof I'd done everything right, paid every bill, took every extra shift, helped every person I loved. Turns out a key can fit a door and still not open a home. My name is Renee Morgan, 50 years old, Houston, Texas, and 1 week in April taught me more about love, loss and dignity than 50 years before it. Mornings on Maple Street used to taste like coffee and responsibility. I'd be up before sunrise reviewing spreadsheets for a construction firm that built half the strip malls on the north side, project manager. Deadlines in my right hand, overtime in my left. My daughter, Kayla, 24, would FaceTime while picking outfits for a job she still was about to start. My son, Marcus, 27, drifting between gigs and next big ideas. And Evan, my husband of 26 years, an English teacher who loved poems but not budgets. If a bill was late, Renee will cover it. If a car broke down, Renee will fix it. If a dream needed down payment, Renee believes in us. Belief is expensive when you're the only one paying. On a Tuesday, I lost my job. Company restructuring. They folded the severance check into a manila envelope like an apology in paper form. The HR lady said, "You're so resilient." Resilience, I learned, is what people call you when they're keeping what you earned. I drove home rehearsing how to tell Evan, "We'll tighten up, pause subscriptions, sell the extra TV." When I pulled into our driveway, a white sedan was parked out front. 2 strangers, blue polo shirts, clipboard smiles. "Mrs. Morgan, from Sunfield Servicing. We're here about the home equity line." I blinked. "What line?" Their smiles didn't move. "The one you took last fall. We sent notices." Notices I never saw. Letters I never opened, because I'm the kind of woman who pays things before they turn into letters. At the bottom of their clipboard, I saw Evan's signature, notarized. My stomach turned a shade of cold I didn't know a body could feel. He came in through the back, dropping keys in the ceramic dish I'd bought the day we closed on the house. I held up the papers. "What did you sign?" His eyes flickered. "Renee, calm down. It's a temporary HELOC. For Kayla's boot camp, for Marcus's startup, for us." "For us?" I whispered. "Without me?" He ran his hands through his hair the way he does when the truth is heavier than his words. "I thought you'd say no, and then I was going to tell you when we were ahead." Ahead? We were behind on the mortgage, behind on my rest, ahead only in empty promises. Wednesday, the servicer called. "Payment delinquent. Remedies will proceed." Thursday. I found 2 credit cards I never opened, sitting at balances I never made. Friday morning, a notice on our door, intent to accelerate, vacate or cure. By noon, a locksmith spun the cylinder that used to recognise me. The white sedan idled at the curb. A neighbour waved, small, unsure, like grief could be contagious. I stood on the porch with a reusable grocery bag and the silver key I kept turning in my palm, like maybe the metal would remember me if I begged long enough. Miss Laverne, our neighbour, shuffled over in house slippers. 78, floral gown, the kind of woman whose hugs know your middle name. "Baby," she said, "come sit on my steps till the world makes sense again." Miss Laverne poured sweet tea and pulled a shoebox from her hall closet. Inside, mail I'd never opened. Letters Sunfield had misdelivered to her address 2 doors down. Everything from rate disclosures to past due warnings. The box smelled like cedar and second chances. "Been meaning to bring these," she said, guilty, "but you always looked so busy." I flipped through. Evan's signature again and again. Draws against the line, transfers to Kayla. A cashier's cheque for Marcus. My name nowhere. My fingerprints everywhere. I called a number from a business card I'd quietly kept for years. Anita Patel Escu. We met at a women's leadership lunch once, traded cards, never spoke again. Sometimes angels wear blazers. She answered on the second ring. This is Anita. My husband used my house as a bank, I said, and I think the bank let him. Anita's office sat above a taqueria, the air thick with cilantro and courage. She listened without interrupting, a pen poised over paper like a promise. We'll start with forensic review, she said. If your signature is missing, if the notary record is sloppy, if disclosures were misdelivered, we have leverage. We'll seek a temporary restraining order to pause any lockout and demand the service's complete file. I exhaled for the first time in 3 days. What about my family? I asked, my voice small. She held my eyes. We'll deal with documents today, and people when you decide who qualifies as family. I moved into a weekly rental off Airline Drive. Beige walls, clean sheets, a window AC that hummed like it had a song to finish. I set my grocery bag on the counter. 2 bowls, 2 mugs, a pan, enough to live, not enough to drown. That night, Kayla called. Her thumbnail filled the screen. Mom, where are the suitcases? I got a pack for Miami. Work trip. Also, my card got declined. Can you... Kayla, I said, calmer as I held breath. Check your account. It's not my job to refill it. Silence, then a scoff. You sound just like Dad. He said this is all a misunderstanding. We're a family. We help each other. I stared at my reflection in the black of the screen when she hung up. I didn't recognize the woman I saw. She looked awake. Monday morning, the courtroom smelled like floor polish and fresh starts. Anita argued with a spine made of case citations. The judge frowned at the service history. Misdelivered mail, no spousal consent, notary deficiencies. The services attorney devolved into words like industry practice and good faith. The judge raised a palm. TRO granted. Produce the file. No further lock changes until evidentiary hearing. I walked out lighter. Not fixed, but paused. And in a free fall, pause is oxygen. Outside on the steps, Anita squeezed my shoulder. Renee, you'll also need boundaries, the kind written in ink. Start with a separate account, new passwords. And if you're ready, consider what you want from your marriage. I'll support either path, but choose it on purpose. Grief needs somewhere to go. Mine went to my hands. I found a temp job at a warehouse, labelling boxes, scanning inventory, mindless work with a rhythm that felt like forgiveness. At lunch, I sat with a thermos of soup and a notebook, listing every skill I had, scheduling, budgets, mentoring teens from church, patience that could move a mountain 1 teaspoon at a time. One afternoon, a woman from aisle 7 sat beside me. I'm Deja, she said. You look like you say useful things. We laughed. Turns out, Deja had dropped out of a medical billing course because the software scared her. I brought my laptop the next. It hit me then. I'd spent 20 years building buildings for men whose names were etched into lobby plaques. Maybe it was time to build people instead. Evan asked to meet. We sat across from each other in a diner whose coffee tasted like second tries. He looked thinner, tired in the way a conscience looks when it learns to read. I messed up, he said. I thought I was buying us a future. I was just buying more time before you found out who I am. I listened, because forgiveness and permission are not the same thing. I talked to the counsellor at school, he added. I can pick up summer classes, extra pay. He slid an envelope across the table. Inside, a money order for $1,200. Not salvation, but sweat. I'll reimburse what I took, he said, eyes wet. Even if you and I... He couldn't finish. I nodded. Good. Keep receipts. And Evan? I held his gaze. We will not rebuild on secrets. If there is a future, it's on paper. Prenup-style boundaries for a midlife marriage. Or we stay kind strangers who co-parent grown adults. Sometimes strength is not a shout. It's a sentence said quietly and held like law. At the evidentiary hearing, Anita was a scalpel. The notary journal was a mess. Wrong dates, initials that looked like afterthoughts. The judge was unimpressed. Order. Servicer to rescind the unauthorised HELOC, restore title position and correct credit reporting. Costs to the servicer, parties to engage in supervised loss mitigation for any arrears unrelated to the HELOC. I walked out with keys that suddenly felt honest. The silver one pressed a half moon into my palm, not because I was desperate, but because I was remembering. Miss Laverne met me on my own porch. You coming home, baby? I nodded. But it'll be a different house, not on the outside, on the inside. I took a part-time admin role at a community clinic. Nights, I drafted a plan for something I couldn't stop picturing. A small storefront on Airline turned into the Keys workshop. Free Saturday classes for adults who fell through cracks. Budgeting, resume clinics, a corner with 2 donated laptops where Deja could teach billing basics and a retired accountant could show folks the magic of reconciling a checking account without crying. I asked Anita to review the non-profit paperwork. She added notes in the margins, get fiscal sponsor, volunteer waivers, micro-grant list, angels, blazers, same thing. Marcus dropped by one afternoon, baseball cap in his hands like a confession. Ma, I got offered nights at the distribution yard. It's not a start-up, but it's a start. He swallowed hard. Can you help me set up a budget? Not money, a budget. My heart remembered how to be soft without getting small. Kayla sent a text. I'm paying my own rent from now on. Also, can we talk career for real? I wrote back, Sunday, I'll make gumbo. You bring the truth. We painted the storefront a hopeful yellow. Deja curated a shelf of free binders. Miss Laverne brought a potted fern with a ribbon that said, Grow Here. Anita arrived with a box of staplers and a smile that said, I told you so without saying it. We hung a sign, The Keys Workshop, learn the skills that unlock your life. On opening day, 27 people showed up. A grandmother raising 2 grandsons who needed a second chance at algebra. A chef between kitchens who'd never written a resume because his food always did the talking. A 19-year-old with a good heart and a bad credit score. I looked around and knew this was a house built of people. And the mortgage was paid in patience. Evan volunteers on Thursdays now, tutors writing, replaces the coffee filters without being asked. We file everything we're under, truth. The counsellor gave us tools. We use them. We are not perfect, we are present. Marcus shows me pay stubs like report cards. Kayla brings her laptop and a list of questions that end with, thank you, Mom, not can you send, Sometimes I miss the version of us where I fixed every crisis before it learned our names. Then I remember that wasn't family, that was triage. We eat together on the porch. When Houston evenings remembered to be kind, we talk about the people who come to the Keys workshop and the ways we're learning to be useful that have nothing to do with money. A woman stood in the doorway one Saturday while I was labelling a donation jar. She was about my age, blouse pressed into truce lines. She held a stack of mail and a story in her eyes. Are you Renee? I am. She put the mail on the table. My neighbour put these in my box by mistake. Sunfield Servicing. You look like someone who'd know what to do with a mess. I laughed. We sat. She cried. I listened. We wrote down names and numbers and a plan that started with, you deserve to understand your life. When she left, she held a little ring with 2 keys the workshop gives out to graduates. 1 brass, 1 blue plastic. What's the blue one for? She asked. Hope, I said. It doesn't open any door but your own. If you'd told me a year ago I'd be happier in a smaller house with a bigger purpose, I would have called you a poet and asked for a practical translation. Here it is. Boundaries are love with a backbone. Money is a story. Learn to narrate yours. Family is who shows up when there's no applause. And keys are reminders, not of what you own, but of what you've earned. On paper, in court, in the mirror, I still carry the silver key from Maple Street. It doesn't fit every lock anymore, but it fits me. If this story reached you, if you've ever felt locked out of the life you built, know this. Sometimes the door isn't broken. The hinges are just attached to a wall that doesn't belong to you anymore. Build a new one. Hang it where the light is. And if this story touched your heart, subscribe. There's another key waiting for you next week. Bring your questions. Bring your courage. We'll find the lock together. Fade out on a yellow painted storefront, a porch at dusk and a silver key catching the last light. When I started at the community clinic, I thought I was just finding a job. But somewhere between scheduling appointments and restocking toner, I started sketching something bigger, a blueprint, not for buildings this time, but for people. I called it the Keys Workshop, a place for second chances, a storefront painted in a hopeful yellow, the colour of mornings that don't ask for permission to start again. On the first day, the air smelled like new paint and courage. Deja was unpacking donated binders, humming an old gospel tune. Miss Laverne brought a fern wrapped in a bow that said, "Grow here." Anita showed up in a blazer and sneakers, arms full of staplers, saying, "Even purpose needs paperwork." And together we hung the sign. By 9 a.m, 27 people filled the room. Not clients, neighbours. A grandmother raising 2 boys who'd failed algebra but not hope. A chef between kitchens who'd never written a resume because his food did the talking. A 19-year-old who'd never seen his credit report but knew what it felt like to be denied. We talked budgets and balance. We laughed through the math. We shared coffee that tasted like community. As I looked around that small yellow room, I realised this wasn't a class. It was a healing circle with spreadsheets, and for the first time, the woman who built everyone else's dreams was watching one of her own come true. Evan volunteers on Thursdays now. He tutors writing, changes the coffee filters, and remembers to ask before fixing. We file everything. We're under one word, truth. The counsellor gave us tools, and we actually use them. Marcus brings me pay stubs like report cards, proud of every earned dollar. Kayla brings her laptop and a list of real questions that end with, "Thank you, Mom," not, "Can you send?" just, "Thank you." Some evenings we eat on the porch, Houston air soft as forgiveness. We talk about the people we've met through the Keys Workshop, their wins, their walls, and the ways we're learning that usefulness has nothing to do with money. Sometimes I miss the version of us where I fixed every crisis before it knew our names. Then I remember that wasn't love, that was triage, and triage is for emergencies, not families. The woman with the stack of mail One Saturday, while labelling a donation jar, a woman stood quietly in the doorway. She was about my age, hair pulled back tight, blouse pressed into truce lines. She held a stack of mail and a story written all over her face. "Are you Renee?" she asked. "I am." She set the envelopes down gently, as if they might explode. "My neighbour mixed up our mail, Sunfield Servicing. I figured you might know what to do with a mess." I smiled. "You came to the right place." We sat. She cried. I listened. And by the time she left, we'd written a plan that started with 6 simple words. "You deserve to understand your life." Before walking out, she picked up a little ring with 2 keys, what we give every graduate, 1 brass, 1 blue plastic. "What's the blue one for?" she asked. "Hope," I said. "It doesn't open any door but your own." If you'd told me a year ago I'd be living in a smaller house with a bigger purpose, I would have called you a poet and asked for the practical translation. Here it is. Boundaries are love with a backbone. Money is a story. Learn to narrate yours. Family is who shows up when there's no applause. And keys are reminders, not of what you own, but of what you've earned. I still carry the silver key from Maple Street. It doesn't fit every lock anymore, but it fits me, because sometimes the door isn't broken. The hinges are just attached to a wall that doesn't belong to you anymore. Build a new one. Hang it where the light is. And when it opens, don't look back. Just step through.